My parents took me to court for buying a house. No joke. After 10 years of hard work, living off instant noodles, saving every penny, and skipping every luxury, I finally bought my first home. I expected congratulations. Instead, I got a court summons from my own parents. Their claim? You owe us everything you have. I spent a decade sacrificing everything, dreaming of the day I'd finally buy my own home. I mean, everything. But just 3 weeks after getting those keys, my world shattered because I found court papers in my mailbox, and the people suing me for buying my house were my own parents. Can you even imagine that kind of soul-crushing betrayal? Let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in a middle-class Boston neighborhood, our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. My parents, Karen and Robert Anderson, my younger brother Brian, and me. We had the nice house, annual Cape Cod vacations, the whole suburban ideal. But beneath that polished surface, things were different. My parents, especially my mom, had an iron grip on our lives, and finances were their favorite weapon. While other kids got allowances to spend freely, mine came with literal spreadsheets. From age 10, I had to account for every single penny. Every Saturday, it was, "Stephanie, you spent $7 at the mall? What did you buy?" as my mom peered over her reading glasses at my expense report. "Just some hair clips, Mom. They were on sale." "Did you need new hair clips?" "I count 17 in your drawer already." This wasn't guidance, it was interrogation. When I got my first job at 16, they insisted on a joint bank account. To guide your saving habits, they said. What it actually meant was they monitored every transaction, questioning anything they deemed unnecessary. My brother Brian, though, he just absorbed it all. He became their perfect financial protege, often reporting my suspicious spending to our parents like some kind of mini CFO. The real breaking point came when I was 17. I discovered my mother had been opening my mail, including college scholarship offers and financial aid information. The confrontation that followed was brutal. "College is an unnecessary expense," she declared, her voice cold. "You can live at home, go to community college, and contribute to the family fund instead." The family fund. This vague, all-powerful collective pot they controlled, which we were supposedly all expected to contribute a significant portion of our income to. Its purpose was always conveniently fuzzy, but the expectation was crystal clear: obey or else. That night, something inside me hardened. I made a quiet, fierce decision that would shape the next 10 years of my life. I was going to break free from their financial control, whatever it took. I applied for every scholarship under the sun, worked extra shifts, and opened a secret bank account using my best friend's address for statements. When acceptance letters rolled in, I chose a university 3 states away with the best financial aid. The night I told them I was leaving, my father's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen. "You're throwing away everything we've built for this family," he hissed, his voice dangerously quiet. "If you walk out that door, don't expect our support." Brian watched from the staircase, his face a mix of shock and disapproval. "How could you be so selfish?" he asked later that night. "They just want what's best for us." But I knew better. The next morning, I left for college with 2 suitcases and barely enough cash for my first semester's books. What followed were 4 years of extreme financial hardship. I juggled full-time classes with 2 part-time jobs. My meals were the cheapest options available, supplemented by leftovers from campus events. I never went home for holidays. Instead, I worked for time and a half pay. My parents had predicted I'd come crawling back, but I never did. I graduated with honors, a mountain of student debt, and a determination to build my own financial independence. The cost was immense. By graduation, I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly 3 years. Brian showed up at my ceremony, but his presence was just another attempt to negotiate a reconciliation, always with the same condition: I had to recognize my financial obligation to the family. I refused. As I moved into my post-college life, I carried the weight of being financially alone, but also the burning desire to one day own something truly mine, something no one could control, monitor, or take away. Little did I know, that dream would eventually lead me to face my own family in court. After college, I landed an entry-level marketing job in Philadelphia. The salary was decent for a first job, but nowhere near comfortable for a major city, especially with $45,000 in student loans. But I had a plan, one that would demand extraordinary discipline and sacrifice. I rented a tiny room in a rundown house with 3 other roommates. My space was barely 9 by 7 feet, basically a converted walk-in closet. But it was only $400 a month, utilities included. The communal bathroom was perpetually dirty, the kitchen always smelled faintly of burnt curry, and privacy was non-existent. It was cheap, though, and cheap was my religion. My daily routine was brutal. Up at 5:30 a.m. for the cheapest public transportation, often walking miles to save $1 on bus fare. My main job ran 8:30 to 5:30, but instead of going home, I'd head to a local coffee shop to work from 6 to 10 p.m., 3 nights a week. Weekends? No relaxation. Just another 16 hours at a retail job. You're going to burn yourself out, my roommate Tasha would warn, finding me asleep on my laptop. Life isn't just about saving money. But for me, at that time, it absolutely was. Every dollar was meticulously accounted for. My budget was a masterpiece of financial restriction. $400 for rent, $1.25 for a prepaid phone plan, $160 for transportation, $120 for groceries. Think ramen and beans, $380 for student loans, $180 for health insurance, $15 for internet, and $50 for miscellaneous necessities. That left about $850 a month to save, which I automatically transferred to a high-interest account the moment my paycheck hit. I never checked the balance. The temptation to spend would have been too great. My meals were a monotonous rotation: oatmeal for breakfast, peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, rice and beans or eggs for dinner. Ramen, dressed up with frozen veggies, was a treat. Once a month, I allowed myself a $10 takeout meal as a reward. Social invitations became a source of anxiety. Colleagues inviting me for happy hour, friends wanting to go to concerts. I became the queen of excuses. Sorry, got a deadline for a freelance client, or picking up an extra shift. The truth, that I couldn't justify spending $15 on a single cocktail when that money could go towards my house fund, felt impossible to explain. Slowly, the invitations dwindled, and my social circle shrank to a handful of understanding friends who were okay with home movie nights, where everyone brought their own snacks. My wardrobe consisted of the same 7 outfits, all from thrift stores. I cut my own hair. Never took vacations. My one luxury was a $10 streaming service, shared with my roommates. 3 years in, I got a promotion, bumping my salary to $42,000. Did I upgrade my living situation? Relax my budget? No. I just increased my savings rate. While college friends bought new cars or took European vacations, I stayed laser-focused on my goal. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. Dating was nearly impossible. Are you in some kind of financial trouble? One date asked after I suggested a free park concert instead of his proposed restaurant. No, I replied, I'm just saving for something important. Few understood. Relationships rarely made it past the 3rd date. By year 5, I was promoted again, making $55,000. My freelance work brought in another $15,000 annually. My savings were growing faster, but I maintained the same Spartan lifestyle. The only concession was upgrading my health insurance after a scary bout of bronchitis. Year 7 brought another milestone, a job offer from a larger agency, $72,000. For the first time, I allowed myself a small celebration, takeout, eaten on the floor of my studio apartment, while calculating how this income boost would accelerate my timeline. By the end of year 8, I was in a management position, earning $85,000 plus $20,000 from freelance clients. My living situation did improve slightly. I moved into a small studio apartment for $750 a month. But otherwise, my lifestyle remained unchanged. I still tracked every penny, rarely socialized, and wore clothes until they literally fell apart. The sacrifice was taking its toll. I developed insomnia, grinding my teeth at night. My brother Brian had gotten married the previous year. I learned about it through a distant cousin's Facebook post. The chasm between us, between me and my family, felt wider than ever. But then, the numbers in my savings account, which I finally allowed myself to check after year 9, made it all seem worth it. I had amassed just over $320,000. Combined with my excellent credit score from years of perfect payment history, I was finally approaching my goal. At the 10-year mark, I hit my target, $350,000 in savings. 10 years and 2 months after graduation, I was ready to start house hunting. The brutal, lonely decade was about to pay off. With my savings goal achieved, I allowed myself exactly one night to celebrate. I bought a bottle of champagne, not the expensive kind, old habits die hard, and sat on the floor of my studio apartment, making a list of neighborhoods. For the first time in a decade, I felt the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen. The next morning, I started researching realtors. I needed someone who understood my strict budget and respected the magnitude of what I'd accomplished. After interviewing 3 agents, I chose Jessica Taylor, a straight-talking woman in her 40s who specialized in first-time homebuyers. "Most people come to me with champagne dreams and beer budgets," she said during our first meeting. "You're the opposite. You've got a solid budget but very modest expectations. We'll find you something perfect." Jessica was honest about the market, but encouraging. With my budget, I could afford a decent home in several developing Philadelphia neighborhoods. It wouldn't be luxury, but it would be mine. "I don't need luxury," I explained. "I need solid construction, reasonable utility costs, and no major repairs needed in the next 5 years." After a decade of saving, I wasn't about to sink my funds into a money pit. House hunting was exhilarating and exhausting. Over 2 months, I viewed 37 properties. Some were immediate no-goes: water damage, outdated electrical, too far from public transport. Others were tempting but not quite right: a charming row house with original hardwoods, but plumbing that made Jessica wince, a spacious colonial in a flood zone. "This is normal," Jessica assured me. "Finding the right house is like dating. You have to kiss a lot of frogs." Then, on a rainy Tuesday, we visited a modest 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood on the upswing. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen needed updating, the backyard was small, and the previous owners had chosen some questionable paint colors. But the bones were good. The roof was only 5 years old, the furnace recently replaced, and it was a 15-minute walk to the train station. As I walked through the rooms, I could envision what they could become with some paint and simple renovations I could do myself. The asking price was $290,000, comfortably within my budget, even after setting aside funds for closing costs and an emergency repair fund. "I want to make an offer," I told Jessica, standing in what would be my home office. "Are you sure?" "We still have 5 more houses to see this week," she reminded me. I nodded. "This one feels right." We submitted an offer of $275,000 that evening. The next morning, the seller countered with $285,000. After a brief negotiation, we settled at $282,000. The inspection revealed no major issues, just the cosmetic updates I'd already anticipated. The mortgage approval process was smooth, thanks to my exceptional credit score and substantial down payment. I even opted for a 15-year fixed-rate mortgage instead of the standard 30-year, another way to save in the long run. The weeks leading up to closing were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and a growing sense of anticipation. I allowed myself to browse second-hand furniture websites during lunch breaks, planning how I'd gradually furnish my new home without breaking my budget. Finally, closing day arrived. I sat at a table surrounded by strangers, signing document after document until my hand cramped. When the seller's agent handed me the keys, I had to fight back tears. "Congratulations, homeowner," Jessica said, giving me a quick hug. "You did it." That evening, I drove to my new house meeting. I spent that first night on an air mattress in the master bedroom, too excited to sleep. I made lists of small projects: painting, replacing fixtures, cleaning the slightly musty basement. In the morning, I would buy cleaning supplies and begin making this house my home. Over the next few weeks, colleagues congratulated me, though few understood the magnitude of what I'd accomplished. My closest friend, Alicia, helped me paint the living room and kitchen, expressing amazement at my journey. "I can't believe you did this all on your own," she said as we applied a second coat of pale blue. "No family help, no inheritance, no partner to split costs with. Just you." Her words filled me with pride, but they also triggered a realization I'd been avoiding. I still hadn't told my family about the house. Despite our estrangement, some part of me had always hoped that achieving this milestone might bridge the gap. Perhaps they would finally understand that my rejection of their financial control wasn't about rejecting them as family. After much deliberation, I decided to reach out. I composed a brief email to my parents with my new address and a photo of the house, adding that they were welcome to visit. To Brian, I sent a similar, slightly more personal message, hoping my brother might serve as an intermediary. Their responses would shatter any hope of reconciliation and set in motion events I could never have anticipated. 3 days after sending those emails, my phone rang. It was Brian's number. The first time we'd spoken in over 2 years, and my heart raced with nervous anticipation. "Brian, it's so good to— what the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was cold, vibrating with controlled anger. "Why? What?" "I just wanted to share my news with you, and you bought a house." "With what money, Stephanie?" The question confused me. "With my money. I've been saving for 10 years. Brian's laugh was bitter. "Right. Because an entry-level marketing job pays enough to buy property. These days." I tried to explain my journey, the multiple jobs, the extreme frugality, the promotions, but he cut me off. "Mom and Dad want to see you this Sunday. Family dinner at 6. He hung up before I could respond. That Sunday, I drove the 2 hours to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach. The house looked exactly as I remembered: neat hedges, beige siding, the same ceramic welcome sign my mother had painted years ago. My father opened the door before I could knock. He'd aged, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. "Stephanie." No hug, no smile. Just my name, as he stepped aside. In the dining room, my mother was setting the table with the good china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Brian and his wife, Emma, sat stiffly on the couch. No one seemed happy to see me. Dinner was a tense affair. We ate my mother's pot roast in near silence, broken only by Emma's nervous attempts at small talk. When my mother brought out apple pie, my childhood favorite, I foolishly thought it might signal a thawing. As I took my first bite, my father cleared his throat. "So, Stephanie, tell us about this house." I described the property with cautious enthusiasm, mentioning the neighborhood, the small yard, my plans for renovations. "And how much did this house cost?" my mother asked, her fork poised halfway to her mouth. $282,000, I answered honestly. "That's quite a sum," my father said. "And you managed to save this all by yourself?" "With no help." "Yes, I've been working multiple jobs and living extremely frugally. It hasn't been easy, but that's not possible," my mother interrupted, setting down her fork with a sharp clink against the china. "Not with your salary and student loans. I've been promoted several times, and I do freelance work on the side," I explained, my appetite disappearing. "I can show you my savings records if you don't believe what we believe," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is that you've taken what isn't yours." The accusation hung in the air like a noxious gas. I looked around the table. My father's clenched jaw, my mother's thinned lips, Brian's refusal to meet my eyes. "What are you talking about? I haven't taken anything from anyone." My mother's laugh was brittle. 10 years of not contributing to the family fund. 10 years of keeping what should have been shared. And now you flaunt your selfishness by buying property. I struggled to comprehend what she was saying. "The family fund? But I haven't lived at home or received any financial support from you since I left for college." "That's not how family works, Stephanie," my father said. "Everyone contributes. Everyone benefits. Your brother has been contributing 30% of his income since he started working. That fund was meant for all of our futures, including yours, eventually." "But you never told me what the money was for," I protested. "And I've been supporting myself entirely." "Which was your choice," my mother snapped. "But the obligation remains. We calculate you owe approximately $95,000 to the family fund based on what your income should have been these past 10 years. I nearly choked. You expect me to give you $95,000 for what? For your family? Brian finally spoke, looking up with disappointment etched across his face. Emma and I have delayed having children because we're contributing responsibly. We've put off buying our own home. Meanwhile, you've been hoarding money for yourself. That's not fair, I said, my voice rising. I worked 3 jobs at times. I lived in a closet-sized room with 3 roommates. I ate ramen noodles for years to save this money. And now you'll make it right, my father said firmly. You'll sell the house, contribute what you owe to the family fund, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us. I stood up so quickly my chair tipped over backward. I will not sell my house. That money is mine. I earned every penny through sacrifice you can't even imagine. My mother's face hardened. Then you leave us no choice. 2 weeks later, a courier delivered legal papers to my new home. My parents were suing me for $95,000, claiming I had misappropriated family resources and breached family financial agreements. They were demanding the court place a lien on my new house until I paid what they claimed I owed. I sat on my newly purchased secondhand couch, legal documents trembling in my hands, as the full weight of their betrayal crashed over me. The family I had hoped to reconnect with wasn't just rejecting me. They were trying to take from me the one thing I had worked a decade to achieve. The morning after receiving the lawsuit papers, I called in sick to work for the first time in my professional life. I spent hours researching online, trying to understand how my parents could possibly have legal grounds to sue me for money I had earned myself. Concepts like constructive trusts, implied contracts, and familial financial obligations left me increasingly panicked. Could they really take my house? Could a decade of grueling sacrifice be erased by some obscure legal principle I'd never heard of? By noon, I realized I needed professional help. I couldn't afford an expensive attorney, but I couldn't afford to lose my house either. After calling 8 law firms, I found Michael Rivera, a family law attorney who offered a free initial consultation. This is unusual, Michael said, reviewing the lawsuit documents in his modest, cluttered office later that day. His suit was rumpled, but his eyes were sharp. Is it even legal? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. They haven't given me any money since I was 18. How can they claim I owe them anything? Michael leaned back. They're claiming something called a constructive trust, essentially arguing there was an implied agreement that you would contribute to this family fund. They're saying your ability to save money was only possible because of the advantages they gave you, raising you, educating you, instilling financial discipline. But that's what parents are supposed to do. I protested. I agree, he said. But family law can get complicated. The good news is, their case seems primarily built on emotional appeals rather than solid legal ground. The bad news is, defending yourself won't be cheap or quick. Michael's retainer was $3,500, money I had earmarked for painting the exterior of my house. I wrote the check with a shaking hand, the first major unplanned expense in over a decade. Over the next few weeks, Michael helped me prepare my defense. We gathered every financial record, bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns documenting my income and savings patterns for the past 10 years. I contacted former roommates who could testify to my frugal lifestyle, employers who could verify my jobs, even the college financial aid office for records showing I had received no parental support. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was taking an emotional toll. I had trouble sleeping, often waking in a cold sweat from nightmares where I was homeless again. I lost weight. My clothes hung loosely on my already slim frame. Coworkers noticed my distraction, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that my own parents were trying to take my house. 6 weeks after receiving the lawsuit, we had our first court appearance, a preliminary hearing where both sides would present initial arguments. Walking into the courthouse, I spotted my parents and Brian sitting on a bench. My mother wore her church clothes, a conservative blue dress and pearl necklace. My father had on his only suit, the one he wore to funerals and weddings. They looked like respectable, concerned parents, exactly the image they wanted to project. They didn't acknowledge me as I passed. Inside the courtroom, their attorney, James Wilson, was an imposing man in his 60s with a perfectly tailored suit and an air of absolute confidence. As he spoke to the judge, he painted a picture of parents who had sacrificed everything for their children, only to have one child selfishly refuse to participate in the family's financial collective. The Andersons created a family fund that all members contribute to, Your Honor, Wilson explained smoothly. This has been a family tradition, explicitly discussed since their children were teenagers. Brian Anderson has faithfully contributed his share. Stephanie Anderson not only refused to contribute but has used family resources, including the financial education and support she received throughout her formative years, to secretly amass wealth for herself alone. The judge, an older woman named Judge Peterson, turned her sharp gaze to me. "And you're claiming there was no such agreement, Miss Anderson?" Michael stood. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges that her parents mentioned a family fund, but there was never any agreement that she would contribute. More importantly, she has been financially independent since age 18, receiving no support from her parents during college or beyond. The money she saved was earned entirely through her own hard work, often working 3 jobs simultaneously while living in substandard housing to maximize her savings." The judge reviewed some of our submitted documents. "You claim to have saved $350,000 for a house down payment while working entry-level jobs?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, finding my voice. "I can document every dollar I earned and saved over the past decade." "Impressive, if true," she mused, before turning back to my parents' attorney. "Mr. Wilson, what evidence do you have of this alleged agreement beyond the family's verbal claim?" Wilson presented several exhibits: birthday cards I had sent years ago mentioning being family-minded, a high school essay I'd written about financial responsibility, family photos showing what he called a close-knit unit with shared values. It seemed flimsy to me, but Judge Peterson took it all in without revealing her thoughts. "This case requires more detailed examination," she finally said. "I'm scheduling a full hearing for next month. In the meantime, no liens will be placed on Miss Anderson's property, but she is ordered not to sell or refinance the property until this matter is resolved." As we left the courtroom, I felt a momentary relief that my house wasn't immediately at risk. But the battle was far from over. "Round 1 to us," Michael said quietly as we gathered our documents. "But they're going to come back stronger. They'll likely try to depose some of your friends, colleagues, maybe even your college roommates, looking for any statement you might have made about family financial obligations." The next few weeks were a blur of preparations. I took unpaid time off work to help Michael, further straining my now limited finances. We gathered additional documentation, letters from former employers praising my work ethic, statements from college financial aid officers confirming I had received no parental support, even receipts showing my extreme frugality over the years. My parents' attorneys sent intimidating requests for documents, everything from my childhood diaries to records of every conversation I'd ever had about the family fund. Michael assured me these were largely scare tactics and helped me respond only to legitimate legal requests. 2 days before the full hearing, I received a text from Brian. "It's not too late to settle this. Sell the house, contribute what you owe, and we can be a family again." I didn't respond. The morning of the hearing arrived with a knot of anxiety so tight in my stomach I couldn't eat breakfast. I dressed in the most professional outfit I owned, a navy blue dress I'd found at a consignment shop years ago, kept for important client meetings. The courtroom seemed more crowded this time. My parents had brought several family friends as character witnesses, my Aunt Martha, who always sided with them, Pastor Collins from their church, and the Wilsons, longtime neighbors. On my side sat 2 former roommates, my first boss, Allison, and Alicia, my closest friend. The contrast wasn't lost on me, family versus chosen family. The hearing began with my parents' testimony. My father spoke about the family's long-standing financial philosophy, claiming it had been clearly communicated to both children. "We always taught our children that family comes first," he said solemnly. "Financial resources are to be shared for the collective good." Stephanie understood this principle. She simply chose to reject it when it suited her. My mother's testimony was more emotional. She described the sacrifices they had made for my education, the financial wisdom they had tried to impart, and her heartbreak at my betrayal. "We only want what's fair," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Brian and Emma have delayed starting their family to meet their obligations. Stephanie needs to do the same." Their attorney presented enlarged photographs of family dinners, holiday gatherings, and my high school graduation, attempting to establish the image of a close, conventional family with shared values and expectations. He introduced financial records showing Brian's regular contributions to the family fund and contrasted them with my absence of contributions. When it was our turn, Michael started with a straightforward question to my mother. "Mrs. Anderson, you claim that Stephanie has an obligation to contribute to the family fund based on benefits she received growing up. Is that correct?" "Yes, of course." "And would you say providing food, shelter, education, and guidance are things parents are legally obligated to provide for their children?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yes, but so you're seeking financial compensation for fulfilling your legal obligations as parents? That's not fair." "You're twisting my words," my mother protested. Michael moved on to my father. "Mr. Anderson, did you provide any financial support to Stephanie during her college years?" "She chose to attend an expensive, out-of-state university against our advice," my father replied stiffly. "We would have supported her if she had followed our financial plan." "So that's a no?" Michael clarified. "And since her college graduation, have you provided her with any financial assistance whatsoever? Housing, health insurance, car payments?" "No, but thank you. That's all I needed to establish." My former roommate Tasha testified next, describing our cramped living conditions and my extreme frugality. "Stephanie never ate out, never bought new clothes, worked all the time," Tasha explained. "We used to worry about her because she never did anything fun. It was all work and save, work and save." Allison, my first boss, spoke about my work ethic. "Stephanie was always the first to volunteer for overtime. She took on projects no one else wanted for the extra compensation. Many times I found her working through lunch or staying late without even claiming the hours. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something harder, more resolute. "Miss Anderson," Michael began, "could you explain to the court how you saved enough money to purchase your home?" I detailed my financial journey, the multiple jobs, the tiny living spaces, the years of ramen noodles and declined social invitations. I explained my budgeting system, the automatic transfers to savings, the promotions I had earned through dedication and hard work. "Did your parents provide any financial assistance during this 10-year period?" Michael asked. "None," I said firmly. "I have been completely financially independent since I left for college at 18. "And was there ever an explicit agreement that you would contribute to this family fund?" "No. It was mentioned as something they expected, but I never agreed to it. After I left for college, they made it clear that I was on my own financially if I didn't follow their plans. My parents' attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, attempting to trip me up by suggesting I had benefited from family financial wisdom and privileges that enabled my savings. "Isn't it true," he asked with a smug smile, "that the very financial discipline you used to save this money was instilled by your parents?" I paused, considering my answer carefully. "The financial discipline my parents taught me was about control, not independence," I said, looking directly at the judge. "What I did, working multiple jobs, living in substandard conditions, sacrificing any quality of life for a decade, that was not what they taught me. That I learned on my own, out of necessity." The turning point came during my mother's recall testimony. Attempting to strengthen their case, she made a critical mistake. "Stephanie has always been financially irresponsible," she claimed. "In college, she was constantly asking for money for emergencies. We helped her numerous times." Michael pounced. "Mrs. Anderson, you previously testified under oath that you provided no financial support to your daughter during college. Now you're claiming you did. Which statement is true?" My mother flushed, looking to their attorney for help. "Well, there might have been a few small loans." "Do you have records of these loans? Receipts? Bank transfers?" Michael pressed. "It was cash," my mother said weakly. "Family doesn't keep receipts." No further questions, Michael said, sitting down with a satisfied nod to me. In her closing statement, Judge Peterson's expression gave nothing away. She reviewed the evidence, noted the contradictions in my parents' testimony, and acknowledged that the money I saved was earned through my own labor without parental support or contribution. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed, she declared. She looked directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, while families may have their own internal expectations, this court cannot and will not enforce alleged agreements that have no legal basis and appear to be primarily about control rather than genuine family welfare. The gavel came down with a definitive crack that seemed to echo the breaking of whatever tenuous family bonds had remained. The immediate aftermath of the judge's ruling was a blur. Michael shook my hand firmly, his usually serious face breaking into a satisfied smile. Congratulations, your house is safe. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I glanced across the courtroom to where my parents sat. My mother's face buried in her hands, my father's arm around her shoulders, his expression stony. Brian stood nearby, whispering something to their attorney, occasionally shooting glances in my direction. As I gathered my documents, a court officer approached. Miss Anderson, your family is being escorted out separately to avoid any confrontation. You can leave through the main doors in about 10 minutes. I nodded numbly, thanking him for the consideration I hadn't thought to request. Michael helped me pack our evidence, giving me practical advice about filing the judgment and ensuring the case was formally closed in the property records. Will they appeal? I asked quietly. They could try, but they don't have grounds. The judge was very clear, Michael assured me. This is over, Stephanie. You won. Yet victory felt nothing like I'd imagined. As I waited for my parents to leave, I sat alone in the now empty courtroom. The magnitude of what had happened settled over me. I had not only fought my family in court, but I had publicly exposed the dysfunction that had shaped my life. There would be no reconciliation, no happy family dinners in my new home, no healing of old wounds. When I finally left the courthouse, I stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight, feeling both lighter and heavier, free from the immediate threat, but burdened by the finality of the family rupture. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps rapidly approaching from behind. Stephanie, wait. Brian's voice. I turned instinctively, tensing. He stopped a few feet away, his face flushed, either from running or emotion. How could you do that to them? Do you have any idea how this makes them look? The embarrassment you've caused. I studied my brother's face, the familiar features contorted with an anger that seemed to come from a place of genuine hurt. For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I been too harsh? Too uncompromising? Then I remembered the past decade of sacrifice, the lonely holidays, the meals skipped, the nights spent working until exhaustion while my peers built careers, relationships, lives. All leading to the moment when my own parents tried to take it all away through legal manipulation. How could I? I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. How could they sue their own daughter for money she earned herself? How could you support them in this? It was never about the money, Brian insisted, lowering his voice as a couple walked past us. It's about family loyalty, about putting the collective good above individual desires. No, Brian. It's about control. It always has been. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. You've always been selfish, always thinking just about yourself. Is that what you don't understand? I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that mom and dad have convinced you that family means surrendering your autonomy. That love is conditional on compliance. That's not family, Brian. That's control. His face hardened. You think you're so much smarter than everyone else? So independent. But when you're alone in that house you bought with your precious money, who will be there for you? Who will care? The question hit its mark, probing the fear that had haunted me through years of solitary saving. But I had an answer now. People who love me without conditions, I said quietly. Friends who support my dreams instead of trying to own them. That's the family I've built while you were busy being the perfect son. Brian stepped back as if I'd physically pushed him. They're right about you. You're not just selfish, you're cruel. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, and I meant it. My door is always open if you ever want to have a relationship that isn't defined by mom and dad's rules. But I won't apologize for building a life on my own terms. He turned away without another word, walking quickly toward the parking lot where our parents presumably waited. I watched him go, the last fragile thread connecting me to my biological family severing with each step he took. That evening, I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the sparse furnishings I had carefully selected. The victory felt both profound and painful. I had defended my right to the fruits of my labor, but at the cost of any hope for family reconciliation. I reached for my phone and called Alicia. "It's over," I told her when she answered. "I won." "That's amazing," she exclaimed. "We should celebrate. I'll bring champagne, the good kind this time." I found myself smiling despite everything. "Could you also bring those friends you mentioned? The ones who are good at painting? I think it's time I finally finished making this house a home." 2 hours later, my empty living room was filled with Alicia and 4 of her friends, all armed with paintbrushes, pizza, and genuine congratulations. As we worked on painting the hallway the soft green the first had carefully selected months ago, I realized something important. Family isn't always here born to. Sometimes it's who you choose and who chooses you back. The weeks following the court victory brought a strange mixture of peace and pain. With the legal threat removed, I could finally focus on truly settling into my home. I painted each room with colors I had meticulously researched for the perfect balance of calming and energizing. I scoured thrift stores and clearance sales for furniture that expressed my personal style, rather than just meeting minimal functional needs. Slowly, my house began to feel like a home, a real home, earned through sacrifice and protected through determination. But the emotional aftermath of the court battle lingered. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing from dreams where I was back in that courtroom, my parents' accusations echoing off the walls. I'd check my phone compulsively, part of me still hoping for a message from Brian that never came. Alicia noticed my struggle during one of our weekly dinner nights, a new tradition where friends took turns hosting simple meals. "You won the case, Steph, but you're still fighting something," she observed as she helped me wash dishes. "Have you thought about talking to someone? Professionally, I mean." I had resisted the idea initially. Therapy seemed like an unnecessary expense after a decade of extreme frugality. But the persistent emptiness inside me couldn't be filled with new furniture or fresh paint. After researching affordable options, I found Dr. Jennifer Garcia, a therapist who offered sliding scale fees. Family estrangement is its own kind of grief, Dr. Garcia explained during our first session. You're mourning not just the relationship you had, but the relationship you wished you could have had. Over the next several months, our weekly sessions helped me process the complex emotions I had suppressed during my 10-year saving journey. I hadn't just been accumulating money, I'd been building a wall around my heart, protecting myself from the conditional love that had shaped my childhood. Your parents' attempt to control your finances wasn't really about money, Dr. Garcia suggested one afternoon. Money was just the tool they used to demand compliance and punish independence. Then why do I still feel guilty? I asked, like I've done something wrong by keeping what I earned. Because they programmed that response in you from childhood, she said gently. Questioning their authority, even as an adult, triggers that old guilt. That doesn't mean the guilt is justified. Alongside therapy, I slowly expanded my social circle. The friends who had stood by me during the court case became regular fixtures in my life. We started a monthly dinner club, rotating between our homes. I joined a community garden 3 blocks from my house, finding unexpected joy in growing my own vegetables. 6 months after the court case, I received an unexpected text message from Brian. "Can we talk?" We met at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. The conversation was awkward, stilted with unspoken hurt and lingering disagreements. But it was a start. "I'm not saying Mom and Dad were right," he said, staring into his coffee cup. "But I don't think you understand how your leaving affected them. Affected all of us." "I didn't leave the family, Brian," I replied carefully. "I left their control. There's a difference." He didn't agree, but he didn't argue either. We parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following month, a small bridge beginning to form over the chasm between us. My parents remained distant. Through Brian, I learned they had told extended family that I had legal troubles, but didn't specify the nature of the court case. The family narrative had been rewritten to preserve their image while casting me as the problematic child. It hurt, but with Dr. Garcia's help, I was learning to separate their perception from my reality. You can't control their story about you, she reminded me. You can only live your truth and let the results speak for themselves. And the results were speaking. A year after winning the court case, I received a significant promotion at work. The house I had fought so hard to keep was increasing in value. I had even started a small emergency fund for others in situations like mine, people escaping financially controlling relationships who needed temporary support. The most profound change, however, was internal. The anxious vigilance that had driven me through a decade of extreme saving had gradually softened. I learned to enjoy small pleasures without guilt, a meal at a nice restaurant to celebrate a work achievement, a weekend trip with friends to a nearby beach, flowers for my kitchen table just because they made me smile. Financial independence isn't just about having money, I realized during one therapy session. It's about having the freedom to use resources in alignment with your own values without seeking permission or approval. 18 months after the court case, Brian and Emma had their first child, a daughter they named Lily. The birth announcement came with an invitation to meet my niece, one I accepted with both excitement and trepidation. In their modest apartment, holding the tiny bundle that was my niece, I felt a new chapter beginning. Brian and I had established careful boundaries around topics like money and our parents, creating a fragile but growing relationship independent of the dynamics that had separated us. "She has your nose," I told him, smiling down at Lily's sleeping face. "Poor kid," he joked, a glimpse of the brother I remembered from before money and control had come between us. As for my parents, the distance remained. I sent them a card with my niece's birth, expressing joy. They didn't respond directly, but they didn't return it either, a minute crack in the wall between us that might someday allow for more light to pass through. 2 years after purchasing my house, I hosted a home anniversary party, inviting the friends who had become my chosen family. As we gathered in the backyard where I had finally installed the garden I had dreamed about during those lean years, I looked around at the life I had built. Not just the physical house, but the community, the career, the sense of self that no one could take away. Alicia raised her glass for a toast to Stephanie, who taught us all that home isn't just a place you buy, but a space you create through courage and perseverance. Later that evening, as the last guests departed, I sat alone on my porch swing, a birthday gift from my friends, and reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The decade of sacrifice, the painful family confrontation, the ongoing work of healing. The hardest lesson hadn't been how to save money or how to defend myself in court. It had been learning that sometimes, the people who should support you most are the ones you need to establish the firmest boundaries with. That true family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by respect and unconditional support. That independence, financial and emotional, is not selfish, but necessary for authentic relationships. My house stood solid around me, sheltering not just my physical self, but the person I had become through adversity. A person who knew her worth, who understood the difference between sacrifice and surrender, who recognized that the most valuable thing she owned wasn't the property, but the freedom it represented.